my first question is really about you and how you, when you started, approximately what your official position was in terms of title, and then what the job was, and how you kind of not only, you get this job and this is what the position is and you're told this is the job, but then what the reality was of doing that job. So talk about, like, basically, I want to know your secret origin. Were you bit by a radioactive Twitter?
My secret origin goes back to before Twitter was even a thing. I started at G4 on December 2nd, 2001. Part of the first wave of producers hired. We weren't the first people hired. That was really the web team that, helped concept the network, but hired in as a producer, and within less than 2 months was promoted to supervising producer of about a third of the network's programming. Originally hired to create Cheat with Corey Rouse. And I was there from not the very beginning, but close to the beginning, at least the beginning of production.
And then when did you transition? I mean, 2001 is very early.
Yeah.
This is when it was Tech TV then, right? Like,
no, see, it's interesting. This might be something good to put in the movie. This is a story that gets really messed up. In 2002, G4 TV and Tech TV were two completely different entities. I think it was long about 2004. I don't remember the exact date, but Comcast purchased Tech TV. They purchased Tech TV in order to help, boost G4's viewer base, basically. And for a while there, for a few months after the purchase, the whole thing was rebranded G4 Tech TV before it was then rebranded again to just G4 TV. But there's a lot of misinformation I see still to this day that a lot of people think that Tech TV took over G4. That actually wasn't the case, or that Tech TV became G4. Now Tech TV obviously existed for many, many years before G4 launched in 2002, but it was literally Comcast purchasing that company from Paul Allen and merging the two networks is how it came to be. That's really the birth of Attack of the Show, because that's where the show came out of that merger, really.
Well, to get technical, and I do like all this because this is all background that we're going to use. We have a series of segments telling the history of the network.
Nice.
That's done with animation and graphics to explain it simply. And Robert Juster's helping me get all the dates and facts right. So
very cool.
Yeah. So tell me then, because Screensavers was a show that was on Tech TV that had Leo Laporte, Sarah Lane. It had this sort of cast of characters. And then that show came almost intact to G4. So can you tell me about that process? And then what was it like for the people? You're getting it's almost like a divorce in the sense of you're having to merge two different families. Right, in a sense, it was just you've got the one family where things were going good, then you got this family that's buying and then you've got to merge, and some people survived the merger and some did not.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a fair comparison. I didn't have anything really to do with that show, in particular, but it was definitely tough on the people who came from San Francisco. I went up there one time, to meet people before they came down, and, it's understandable. They were on the end of, more people left from that network did than, G4 when the move happened. But, meanwhile, it was incredibly positive and happy in Southern California. We all thought, great, the network's going to get bigger. We'll finally be able to be Nielsen rated. Because prior to that merger, didn't exist. There were no Nielsen ratings. The network wasn't big enough. So, it was rough on a lot of people. But, kudos to them, the ones who, either, chose to stick around or who were, lucky enough to stick around, I guess. They, helped, turn the network, it helped the network turn a corner from one thing to the next.
Now tell me how I knew you was when I would come on Attack of the Show. I knew you as the guy that in general there's producer, but you were in charge of a big aspect of the show.
Yeah.
Which was, correct me if I'm wrong, the very first Twitter wall, the very first integration. Well, that was one of the things, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, and I'll research this. I believe that probably the first integration of social media audience with a TV show was Attack of the Show.
I would.
Can you state that and correct me? And so could you tell the factual? I'm going to mute myself.
Sure.
Tell the factual version of that, because I don't know of any other. Some other television shows may have had a Twitter account, but I don't know of any show that was so directly active with their audience.
Right.
Can you talk about that in specific?
Yeah. So my department, we did a lot of different things, but one of our core functions was we did the on-air interactivity and news ticker for Attack of the Show. And for X-Play as well. I had a couple of people who were writers who wrote the daily news that appeared at the bottom of the screen on both shows. And then I had another group that basically we were the, don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain. We were, or more accurately, don't pay attention to the men standing in the really dark corner of Studio A. We ensconced ourselves back there in the corner in the dark. I think we were maybe seen on air in a grab shot maybe twice in all the years that we did it. Attack of the Show's Twitter wall was, if not the first, one of the first examples of integrating social media into television. We actually won 2 Shorty Awards back to back in 2 years' time for best use of Twitter on television. The Shorty Awards being, as they called themselves, the Academy Awards of the Internet. And there were other entries, but we had already been doing stuff with the Twitter wall for a couple of years before the Shorty Awards even existed. We had to be whitelisted with Twitter because of how much data we were pulling from Twitter to get, the feed of the Attack of the Show fans giving their reactions in real time. And one interesting thing about the Twitter wall, a lot of people, and it's a credit to my team, getting the audience to believe that the Twitter wall was in real time. You can't do that. You can't do that with live callers into a show. You can't do that with social media. You've got to screen things and you've got to produce it. If it was just a live feed where people just could put in whatever they want, that would never have been airable. So we hand selected every single tweet that went through. And we're talking if they were doing an audience call out, asking for opinions or asking for funny, jokes from the audience. We were talking to the audience for about an hour, 30 minutes to an hour before every show, and generally 30 minutes after every episode of Attack of the Show. It's like a warm-up comedian, if you will. We'd be talking to them. We'd tell them little secrets like, oh, we're looking over there on the other side of Studio A, and we see a lot of chocolate pudding, and we'd tease them. We'd basically tease them, get them excited, and then we would look for, the best material just to keep up there. The Twitter wall was constantly moving. You can see numerous examples of the hosts, especially in the earliest days of it, get distracted and look over and like, hey, that guy just said something really funny. Kevin did it quite a few times where he'd see something and he'd have to kind of react to it. And my apologies to the directors for screwing up the camera sight lines a couple of times by distracting Kevin. But it was about as real time. The Twitter wall was about as real time as it could be, given the fact that we didn't let anything bad go out over the air.
Well, I'm sure people tried, but
they did. People tried very, very hard to get stuff past us. I mean, we even filtered out the common swear words and more common terminology you wouldn't have wanted on the air. And, people try to, spell things differently. Oh, the I becomes an exclamation point. Very easy to filter that out. The trickier things were when people would try to sneak in real words or common phrases that would be very inappropriate to put on the air. And, we thought everything through. It wasn't just, oh, that's good, publish. We thought everything through before we put it on.
Can you recount some specific instances of viewer interaction? There really was a viewer army in a sense. Like, there was the Attack of the Show viewer army that was made more than so many shows that I can recall. This relationship between the audience, which is why I think the fandom has sustained for so many years to the present, even after 8 years after cancellation. There was this relationship. Can you recount some specific instances? And then I'm sure there were recurring people that would, their goal is to get on that Twitter wall and be in that feed. I mean, now I think that it's almost like that's a commonplace thing, is to use social media as a way to get free content and programming for shows. And it's also like a quick take barometer about a number of issues. And now it's also driving us all crazy. But before social media drove us crazy, and this is one of the threads in the documentary, is this is when everything was so new. We just celebrated all the things.
Yeah, exactly. I want to say the Twitter wall started roughly 2009, maybe 2010. I don't remember that specific, but it was really all about the fans. The Twitter wall was all about the fans. We would talk to a lot of the same people every day. Some people would come in, as they could. Others would show up every so often. And then there was the dedicated core viewer army who, if they didn't show up, you kind of worried about them. Like, we had a guy on the East Coast, his Twitter handle was Moxie, after the Old School Soda. If he didn't show up one day with his kind of acerbic wit and commentary on what was going on set, we'd actually get worried. And we'd tweet at him, say, hey, dude, you okay? We don't see you. And, 10 times out of 10, it was, oh, I didn't feel good, or I had to go run an errand or something. We had a guy named Silent, and his Twitter icon was the shh emoji with the finger over the mouth. He doubtfully missed a single episode ever. I can still recall a lot of their names: M.W. Mowry, Stephen Lustafin. There were so many of these people that would just show up on the daily. I'm still friends with a few of them on social media, to this day. And they were really the drivers. They were the tastemakers. They were the influencers of Attack of the Show before influencer was even a thing. They literally, were there. They made sure they were there early, not on time, not right as the show is starting, but they were there at least 30 minutes early to shoot the breeze. Most of them were on the East Coast. So it was the end of their day. They're at home, they're cracking a beer or whatever, and they're kicking up their feet to watch Kevin and Olivia. And that was how they ended their day. They ended their day by hanging out with Attack of the Show.
Tell me about how that, there were, I want to talk about your sort of best and worst moments that you witnessed on the show. And by best, there's the McHammer incident. There's not necessarily that I need to jog your memory, but what are some of the things that and worst, also funny. I don't mean worst bad, but just the McHammer thing to me is so Attack of the Show, and the fact that was let go. And I have a whole thing about how things were spelled phonetically in the it just that used to screw me up, because I would teleprompter sometimes to go and I'm just, I read the King's English. And so I would read this stuff and it would screw me up because I'm like, that's not the correct spelling. And it's like, no, they're spelling it phonetically for Olivia, which happened after that incident. But the fact that Kevin, who's the most quick-witted human I've ever met, best person I've ever worked with in television, period, bar none, and the quickest wit and most intelligent to where his brain is 9 steps ahead of everyone else in the room. I don't know. To me, the chemistry of Kevin Olivia was like, that was attack to me.
It really was. I mean, I wish I had 10% of the quick wit that Kevin Pereira has. It was magic. And I mean, that's a guy who started out basically as an intern on G4TV.com, the show, in 2002, and he worked his way up to being host of Attack of the Show. I mean, it's literally a Hollywood dream come true. He was literally just a kid. He was literally a kid, and he became the host of the show. But best and worst moments, the best moments were just about every day. If it was a bigger stunt that the show was doing, like the world's biggest chocolate pie, that was hugely fun. It could get distracting back there in the far stage left corner of Studio A. Like me and my partner sitting there working, we're trying to pay attention to what we're doing and make sure the Twitter wall is active. But sometimes something is so bloody funny going on just 20 feet away from us that we'd have to stifle a laugh if it was inappropriate at the moment, and we'd get distracted from what we were doing, and we just kind of have to stop and look off into the distance like, well, that just happened right over there. Anytime the remote control squirrel Ronnie Gale shot across the set, Twitter would light up. Twitter would get excited to see it. One of the biggest things, I don't remember the guy's name, but there was one specific Twitter user who every single solitary day would tweet at us asking for that production audio canned sound effect of an eagle screeching. You know the one. It's the really common. I'm not going to try to replicate. Every day, the show used it for something. They just the sound guy would randomly drop it in, and this guy fixated on that for months, to the point which I think they finally stopped acknowledging him when we put it on the Twitter wall. It's like, no, we're not doing that. We're over that. We're over that. We're over the eagle cry. We're over that. But anything that the hosts did on a regular basis, Drunkle Ted was very popular with the Twitter fan base of Attack of the Show viewers. There's not a worst. I can't say that there's a worst moment. The only one that I could think maybe would be when the show did a memorial episode when Steve Jobs passed. That was literally the only thing that I can point to in my memory where the viewers were not their happy-go-lucky selves. I mean, we were on the air for hours. Kevin was doing things the day that Steve Jobs passed, and the Twitter wall was, the users were super respectful, but it was not the usual camaraderie and, happy-go-lucky behavior that we would see on the regular.
Tell me about, the day that Olivia, can you talk about firsts and lasts? And if you don't have, I don't have all these stories, right? So I'm asking, I'm just looking for who can bear witness to certain things happening, like Olivia's first day, which I have my own, the first time I worked with her, right? I happen to know that Whitney Cummings was one of the hosts that was considered, with Olivia.
Yeah.
I don't know if you knew that. You may have known that.
Yeah.
But can you talk about Olivia's first day, her last day, Kevin's first day, and last day? And you may not have all those, but if you can speak to those first and last days for both of them and what that was like.
I can't speak to Olivia because we didn't have the Twitter wall yet. The Twitter wall came in sort of with her or just after she came on. So that, she kind of predated us. I don't remember anything super specific, but I do remember a lot of the viewers on the Twitter wall being very bummed on both Kevin and Olivia's last days. No one was angry. No one was, disrespectful. They knew why the hosts were leaving, when they were leaving. And it was a lot of, the show's not going to be the same without you. It just won't be the same. That was the oft repeated refrain for both of those hosts when they finally left.
Yeah, I think, there was the era after Kevin when Candace came along, but I felt when Kevin left, I felt that was the end of the show. Like, the show was, at least from where I sit, I'm also not, when I talk, I'm not using anything. But what I'm saying is, just from where I stood, and just to maybe jog your memory or a thought, I felt that it was the Kevin Pereira and Friends show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because anybody that was on with Kevin it was the Kevin and Friends show in a big way, especially after Olivia left, and then a few more people kind of came through in various, yourself and Chris Gore included. Kevin just had this magic that he could get whoever was sitting next to him to be awesome and amazing and entertaining. James Cameron, he has James Cameron on the set of Attack of the Show, doing amazingly crazy things and, making him very, very human. Not that he's not human, obviously, but you think about a director of James Cameron's stature and you don't necessarily think of him picking up a steel chair and swinging at Drunk Old Ted. God, I hope I got that story right. That's what my memory recalls anyway. But Kevin and Olivia had an incredible magic. Kevin and Candace, had a great magic as well. But I would agree with you. After Kevin left, it was different. It was definitely different.
Did you keep anything from the show? Did you keep there were scripts and there were a lot of things. A lot of people just, I know, have worked on television shows, and this is where I felt like I was on Attack of the Show. I was on 3 episodes of Screensavers. Then I was on Attack of the Show, and I was there, and I was on the very last episode. And I felt so grateful because it was almost 8 years. It was like 3 months shy of 8 years that I got to do this job. And every TV show I'd done previous only lasted 2 seasons. So I felt so grateful. So it was like this magical thing, like, that never, I think, will be recaptured in that sense, although they'll try. But did you get to keep anything physical, a memento? And if you do have it, can you take a photo of it when you send this? But did you get to keep anything? And then can you tell me what that means, the thing that you kept from the show? Or it can be even like a thing you kept that is an intangible thing.
From Attack of the Show, I know somewhere in a box here. You know what? I'm going to actually do something fun here. I'm going to quote Will Wheaton, who told me one time that he has a box of what is technically the Will Wheaton Presidential Library of artifacts and things he's collected over the years. So I'm going to borrow that from Will. So somewhere in a box is what I guess I would call the G4 Presidential Library box. I know I have a couple of the old cell phones that hung from the ceiling when they took those down. I know somewhere I have one of the pieces of viewer-made Keyboard Cat artwork. I don't remember the exact one. I think it was a watercolor, but it was actually a really, really nice rendering of Keyboard Cat. That's all I really remember from Attack. Anything that I had, apart from the Shorty Awards trophies that we won.
That's great. That's awesome. I also have a couple of those cell phones. I have a bunch of those. I do have my own, just having done a bunch of shows, I do have these sort of a box for each show. For Attack, I have t-shirts that I wore on doing DVDs Day. So,
actually, no, I did. I thought of something else. Before the show ended, they were doing wardrobe sales just to clean stuff out. They put it in the common area outside of the EG4 building. I know I have a couple of pairs of boots really, really heavy duty steel toed boots that someone on the show wore because they were from Attack. I don't think Kevin had enormous feet, but whoever wore these, they were very big feet. They're even too big on me. And I know I've got a pair or two of those lying around somewhere.
I bought a lot of clothes from that sale. I remember that being pretty cool. Mm-hmm. So can you talk about, here's something we've been with my editorial team cutting, montages. We call them dirty montages because they're just fat, sort of like a topic. And one of the things that I've noticed with so much of the footage that we've watched is most of what was done in Attack of the Show could not be done today. In the cancel culture world that we live in, Attack of the Show would get canceled every day. I assure you, and many of the things that I said when I was on the show, I cringe now. Can you talk about how what it was that Attack had this freedom to be creative with its audience that was very supportive, whereas today I believe that the audience has changed where they're almost looking for you to screw up or say something. So I think the understanding was that when you watch Attack of the Show, we were all in on the same joke. And I feel like today maybe that sense of humor has been eroded. My fear is that in the rebirth of Attack of the Show, I don't know if you can do it now. I don't know if you can capture lightning in a bottle. I'm asking to talk about kind of a big picture thing of this is a moment, the things that happen on Attack of the Show, the crazy, some of the footage we've been going through, Kevin they'll be looking at some new tech product, a new phone. Kevin will make an offhand remark that is and it's on to the next thing where you're just like, what? I'm still thinking about the thing you said 3 things ago. Can you talk a little bit about the climate then and what you could get away with saying and how the climate may be different now?
So the thing, to keep in mind, and it doesn't seem like it, but we're talking more than a decade ago when Attack of the Show started. Twitter launched in 2006. And we started doing on-air interactivity 2009, 2010, basically. Social media was a completely different thing. It was like the Wild West. It was much like the internet was 25 years ago, where there were no rules. Nobody was policing anything. There's a reason the Communications Decency Act had to be passed because of behaviors people were doing in 1990, in the mid 1990s. So with Twitter, it was, I'll compare it to the Wild West, and there were obviously lots of things going on Twitter that were not cool, things that would never have made it on air. But it'll be interesting to see what they could potentially do now. I can't recall ever putting something on the Twitter wall that I didn't feel comfortable with. I basically treated the Twitter wall as it had to be G-rated. I mean, you'd maybe get a damn or a hell, but anything that in our mind, we thought we met religiously with the standards and practices people to make sure we were on the same page as them. Because while there was a standards and practices guy with the show in the control room every day, we were on our own. Myself and the Twitter wall guys, it was up to us. We had to make the judgment call. That is a euphemism for something we don't want. Delete, gone. Didn't put it on the air. But social media has evolved so much in the intervening decade that, cancel culture didn't truly exist in, between 2010 and 2012. And it would be interesting to see what on-air reactions would be like to some of those things, now in 2020.
Well, I think it's changed a lot. I mean, it's changed a lot, which is my concern. Will the show be able to recapture that magic? I think that's a big question mark, and neither of us can answer it. And I do happen to know that they've been working on the relaunch of G4 for more than 2 years. And there was another team that was going to do it, and then they brought in Blair Herter and this new team earlier this year. So it's been.
Yeah, I'd heard similar rumblings for a couple of years now.
Yeah. So I'm curious how you feel. I have really specific thoughts about this. I want to hear what your take is on how fandom has changed. I believe that in the era that we were doing Attack of the Show, I recall everyone there was a nerd. Every single person on Attack of the Show was a nerd. You know, Mike Shaw, you name a person who worked in from the highest to the lowest, maybe not the super highest, but at least the majority of people that worked there were nerds. I mean, real legit nerds with their own specific areas of interest. And I remember getting in so many in-depth, fun discussions about nerdy stuff, right? But what I found really interesting was it was all done with passion and enthusiasm. Whereas today, I believe that the conversation has gotten to the point where if you don't, whatever it is, I like this Star Wars movie, I don't like the Star Wars movie. Now it's become, I believe fandom has become divided in a sense. I mean, maybe that's just a reflection of our current political space where, you know, that's just the way everything is. But can you discuss that a little bit? At least how you feel fandom has changed from, you know, Attack of the Show in its heyday to today. How are things different?
So I have a saying that I use on the regular with this when this subject comes up. Lewis and Gilbert did not fight for our nerd rights for us to not get along with each other. That's the problem with nerddom and geekdom and fandom in this day and age. It's practically, you know, Civil War levels of us versus them when it comes to an opinion seemingly in any fandom. And it's sad to see because 10 years ago, you didn't see that. You know, sure, you'd see audience members saying, I don't agree with you, Chris Gore, in this movie. I didn't like that. Or, Kevin, come on, you just don't like phone A because you love phone B. But it was never, ever this super divisive, you know, oh, you can't like this piece of entertainment media because it, you know, does bad thing. Or, you know, there was never, ever any of that. Fandom has changed, and not for the better, and it's hard to say why that is. Is it part of our culture? Is it because of social media, everybody having a semi-equal voice? But again, the earlier days of Twitter specifically in social media were very, very different. We would never see a conversation devolve into a, you know, I'm right, you're wrong type of scenario like you see, you know, pretty much any night with any show that advertises a Twitter handle nowadays. You can pretty much weigh in on any hashtag or any show's Twitter feed, and there's not going to be a lot of middle of the road.
Yeah, it's wow, well said. I love that. That's
and
awesome.
I think you're one of the first people to understand the Lewis and Gilbert reference. No, that's not true. I said that at random to somebody, and you could see the flash over there, the flash of recognition. Did you just invoked Revenge of the Nerds in your argument? I said, I did because it's the truth. In the 80s, nerds were nerds. Nerds, you could not like, I'm dating myself, but I was a teenager in the 80s. You could not effectively admit to a lot of people that you collected comic books, that you played Dungeons and Dragons, that you played video games. There were the nerds, there were the jocks. It was a very, very real thing. And, you know, that movie came out, Revenge of the Nerds came out. And I think for a lot of people, whether you were an uber smart nerd like some of those guys in the movie were portrayed as, or you were just someone who liked what we all now consider, you know, geek aficionados type stuff, you couldn't admit some of that kind of stuff back then. So yeah, that's why I love invoking those two for that movie.
Yeah, I feel like now they could probably do a movie called Revenge of the Jocks.
Yes, exactly.
Now that nerd culture has gone cool, I think it might actually circle back where maybe it's not cool again.
The funny thing, jocks, or at least sports fans, are almost nerds themselves now, because if you look at if you look at fantasy leagues, I'll tell you right now, I've still got useless information buried in my hard drive about what the hit points were for a beholder in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Rule Revision 2. But I could not begin to, stand toe to toe with some of the people who pull stats out of thin air as they exchange players in fantasy baseball or football. It's frightening and impressive just how nerdy that world can be in and of itself.
Let's I want to talk about the end of Attack of the Show and your memories of the last day. I mean, we did a live show that we know, I'm trying to remember if it aired, I think we shot it in early December or maybe late November, and then we were just off, and then they did these sort of best of shows that ran for a couple of months in early 2013.
Right.
But effectively, we were done with the show before the audience was.
Right.
Can you talk about that and that last day and your memory of it and your feelings, and if there's something specific you can say about that last day? And I'm asking everyone this question, by the way. In fact, when I sent you that sort of like general topic, like some are specific to you, but then I'm asking everyone generally those same subjects.
Sure.
Beats throughout the doc, but can you talk about the last day?
I don't have a ton of specific memories about the last day on the set for Attack of the Show, apart from, hugging the hosts and shaking hands with people and, saying semi goodbyes, to the viewers through Twitter. I was still around for a couple of months after that, but it was somber. It definitely felt like the end of an era for, those of us who'd been there, even before the G4 TV and Tech TV merger. I think some of us may have taken it even harder because we'd been around longer and we'd seen how we'd grown from a network that barely had enough programming to fill out a 6-hour programming block, let alone 24/7. I don't really have anything more specific than that, apart from it definitely felt like the end of an era that wasn't going to ever happen again.
Well, I would heartily agree with you. I have my own story about that day that I'll tell. I don't know if it'll make it in the doc, to be honest. I'm sort of an entry point and an exit point for the doc, but I plan to be in it as little as possible. So
probably a good idea. That's probably a good call.
Embodied voice that is basically enabling other people like yourself to tell your stories, in addition to many others. So I'm your way in and sort of on the way out. That's at least my plan going forward. So
nice.
I think we covered pretty much everything, but I want to ask, and I'll ask, I want to ask everybody, is there something I missed? Is there something you want to say? Not necessarily a sum up. You don't have to do that, but just like something I failed to ask, or an anecdote or story that you really think is worth it, because ultimately it is worth it to tell the fans, because whether this makes it in the doc or not, we are going to release episodes as a podcast, although I've kind of gone back on my original intention with the podcast. My original idea of the podcast is I would just release the podcast as we were making the doc. And then I realized this is a bad idea. because it's basically like you're showing all the footage and spoilers are getting out.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So if all the footage is out, then it's just kind of ruining the experience of seeing it. Now, on the DVD or digital release for the people who back the Kickstarter, I want to be able to share all the stories,
Right. I got something for you. I would like to take this moment to thank those G4 TV viewers, the ones who showed up every single day for Attack of the Show. They didn't have to. They were not paid audience members like you see with a lot of live studio audience shows from Hollywood. They were there of their own accord. They were there of their own free time because they wanted to be and because they loved what Attack of the Show was, what they did, what it represented. They showed up because they had a voice. Sure, nowadays you can vote interactively on things like, any music singing competition, but you're not necessarily going to see such direct host audience interaction as you would in the glory days of Attack of the Show. And sure, every single night I would sign off of Twitter on the @AOTS handle by saying, thank you for tuning in tonight and tweeting with us and watching the show. But if this makes it into any form of the doc or its ancillary footage, this is a heartfelt thank you to each and every one of you who took the time to make Attack of the Show what it was from the fan side of things.
That's well said. Wow. Rick, thank you so much.
Oh, no problem, man.
This is great, man. If you have a photo of that box, your presidential G4 TV presidential library.
Yeah, let me. I'll have to dig it out. I mean, a lot of it's not going to be exactly Attack related, but I know there's got to be a few things in there. See, that's the problem. If you were doing the G4 comprehensive documentary, this would have taken 6 hours because I've got stories that go so damn far back and through all the various iterations.
I mean, we are going to, just because of the number of people that I'm interviewing, we're going to come up with ways to graphically represent with voiceover certain eras and things, but this is going to be focused mostly, it's really about Attack of the Show. Yeah. And then mostly about the Kevin and Olivia era.
Right. Makes sense. Makes perfect sense.
Really about that. To me, that was when you ask people what they remember, that's what they remember.
Yeah, absolutely agreed.
And then,
For some reason, Kevin and Olivia, that just rolls off the tongue. I mean, nothing against Candace, because Kevin and Candace were great together. I personally thought Candace and Sarah were incredible together. They just had this fun energy. But there was just something about Kevin and Olivia that was just absolute magic.
Like Laurel and Hardy or Abbott and Costello. Or no, they really were. They had a chemistry that I hope can be recaptured.
Yeah, agreed.
More than anything, I hope that it's possible to recapture that.